Welcome back to another episode of the Lender Podcast. My name is Bryce. I'll be your host. And today we're going to talk about why I became a hard money lender in the first place. But before we jump into that, first things first, this podcast is sponsored by Lender, which you can check out at joinlender, lendr.com, joinlender.com. Lender is a hard money origination and servicing tool. So if you're currently using Excel, that is a great tool to check out, and I promise you won't regret it. So first things first, let's talk about why I decided to become a hard money lender in the first place. And it's funny, right? Because hindsight is 2020, as they say. And if you had told me 5 years ago that I was going to be selling all my rentals, I probably would have called you crazy. I wouldn't have believed it, simply because I had a plan. Probably like many of you, you're very math focused, very analytical, and you've got all the numbers. And my wife, she laughs at me because I'm always pulling out my calculator on my phone and checking numbers and doing different things like that. So that's exactly what I did. Let's back. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's get back to probably 2016. My wife and I, I guess she was my girlfriend at the time. We had just met, and she was luckily in real estate too. So we were both house hacking before we met each other. So I had bought a house. I was renting out the bedrooms to my roommates. She was also doing the same. So before we even met, we were both doing the same thing in real estate, which is definitely one thing that that attracted me to her. So we joke that we fell in love at first interest rate, which is funny because our first date, we went on a hike and we were talking about mortgage rates and what your monthly payment was and what your roommates were renting you and what was your cash flow and depreciation and how much was this and that, and we were just sharing numbers, and it's funny that we bonded so strongly over that. So we ended up getting married, obviously, because she's my wife now. We got married in 2018, and we ended up selling my personal property simply because she had a nicer home. We kicked out the roommates in my home, sold that house, kicked out the roommates in her home, and then we moved into that one. And in hindsight, a lot of people might say, well, why did you sell your house when you probably could have just turned that into a rental and kept it as a rental? Yeah, probably that would have been a good thing to do, but we decided to sell it. And luckily we made about 40 grand on that property. And so we took that, we took that money and we dumped it into paying off my credit cards, my student loans, and we had about $15,000 or so left over that we used to buy our first rental. And that's exactly what we did. We had all this experience, and we loved the idea of the cash flow coming in from rentals. So now that we didn't have roommates in our properties anymore, we decided, okay, we're going to take the remaining about $15,000 that was left over after paying off all my debt. And we're going to buy our first rental property. So this was back in, 2018, when everything was, super, super crazy. Prices were super cheap. This was before the COVID craze. And we bought our very first non-owner occupied rental for a whopping $93,000. And I know a lot of people listening to that is like, holy cow, I can't even imagine that. And yeah, that doesn't really happen anymore, but that's what we did. And the property was pretty dumpy. It was built in 1920, but the cash flow on it was crazy. Like, to this day, I don't think that we've ever purchased a property that cash flows better than that as far as like a cash on cash return goes. So we paid $93,000 for the house, but there was also a trailer in the backyard that was kind of like a freebie. So when we bought the property, they just handed us over the title. So I can't remember what the mortgage was. I want to say it was like right around $700 a month, which, again, insane. So between the rents and after paying off all the expenses and maintenance and repairs and everything, I think we were cash flowing $850 a month or something like that. So it was truly crazy. So like, I think the cash on cash on that one was close to 140% because we put almost nothing down to buy the property. So it was just great. It was intimidating at first buying our first rental, but ultimately we loved the cash flow. And so we wanted to keep going. So we bought another property, which ended up being a duplex. And that one, I think cash flowed right around $600 a month net. So we were making $300 net per door because it was a duplex, and it was great. So we kind of thought to ourselves like, wow, this is great. Let's keep going. And yet again, we did. So we bought a fourplex, and that fourplex, I think cash flowed around $1,200 a month net after all expenses. So it was juicy. We just kept saying like, wow, this is really great. I want to keep doing this. And so again, like I said, I pulled out my calculator, pulled out my numbers, and I was like, okay, I want to make $10,000 a month net. So I can quit my job and just do rentals full time. So I was like, all right, we have this many doors. Okay, $250 net per door per month. So I need like 40 doors, and we've got 13 doors right now. So we need this many more. So I only need 7 more fourplexes, and then I'll have my like I had the whole thing planned out. And it was great because we were on that trajectory, and we had purchased the initial property so quickly that we really thought this was going to be the way to do it. Now, what's funny is after a little bit, as most people do, they hit a point where you just run out of cash. You don't have enough money for down payments to keep buying properties. And so even though we were making good money, we had, I think, about $2,500 a month, $2,600, somewhere around there net per month coming in. That was great. It was starting to stockpile, but it was still limiting us and prohibiting us from purchasing more properties. So it's funny because I just, in retrospect, it just seems so funny now. But at the time I was like, well, I guess there's nothing we can do. And clearly that's obviously not the case because people scale very, very quickly. But we were out of cash, and I wanted to scale faster. So I had kind of a mentor buddy at the time who he had, 100 plus some odd doors. And so I asked him, I was like, what do I do? We're kind of stuck. And again, like, it's so monumental at the time, but he was like, have you ever thought of like flipping a house? And I was like, no, I had not thought of flipping a house. So, I mean, call us Chip and Joanna Gaines, because that's what we decided to do. So we found our first property that we were going to flip, and the recommendation from our mentor friend was, for every 3 to 4 properties that you flip, maybe keep one of them. Renovate them, and then the ones that like a little bit older, maybe have some old plumbing, old wiring, things like that. Maybe you can sell those off. But for the ones that are a little bit newer, that are renovated really nice, hang on to that one, do the BRRRR method, pull your money out. But the other ones that you sell, those are the funds that you can use to keep growing and buying more and more rentals. So anyway, we found our first property. It was great. We did the renovation. It took a little bit longer to sell than we wanted, just because this was back in 2018, 2019 or whatever. But we ended up selling it after having it sit on the market a couple months, but we made $26,000. And, so that was like life-changing money to us at the time. And luckily it was enough that, we could continue to buy more properties and buy more rentals. So we were finally back in business. So that first flip that we did, it was kind of the catalyst to, that just unlocked the door for all these other projects. So over the next, 4-ish years, we flipped almost 70 homes. And out of those like 70 homes, we acquired, like physically held on to about 18 or 19 of them, which brought us up to, right around 35 or 40 units. So what's funny is that I'd finally hit that $10,000 goal, that I had, long dreamed about before, but it was almost like I expected it to be almost as if like you had summited this large mountain, and you get to the top of the hill and you're just like, wow, look at this stunning view. Like you finally achieved this goal that you hit. And that wasn't really the case. Like it wasn't euphoric. It wasn't like, yeah, if anything, I kind of just felt a little sick to my stomach. I was like, okay, this is great. It's not the money that I'm complaining about, but it's more like what the number represented. So yes, I had hit my money goal, but I had now 35 or 40 properties. I now had 35 or 40 tenants. And I also had 40 toilets that I had to deal with. And it was just like, I don't know if this is really what I wanted anymore. So, at that point, a lot of people would be like, okay, why didn't you just hire a property manager? And I don't believe in property managers. I don't. And it's not that they're bad people. It's just that the business model itself is broken. So think about this. Say you have a property manager and they've got 2,000 doors that they're handling. Like, that is a lot. There's just, due to the economies of scale, there's no way physically that they can give your property the attention and energy that it deserves. And I'm okay with that. But I just don't believe in them because there's no way that they can handle it the same way that I would. And maybe that's controlling, maybe that's not the way to do it, but it just isn't going to work. So think about this, for example. We had, this last winter, we had a horrible snowstorm. It was like 4 or 5, 6 feet piled up on either sides of the road. So we got a ton of snow accumulation, and then come like March, April sometime, we had like a really warm week all of a sudden. So all of this water just started to melt, and people were having basements flooding and, things like that. So luckily, and I'll get to this in just a second, but luckily I had sold off a lot of my portfolio, and I don't regret it, because if I had some of those properties still, statistically speaking, maybe 10 or 20% that did have basements, they would probably have flooded. In fact, a property that I had sold, there was like an insane like runway of water, and the 2 basement apartments did flood, like up to chest height, and like the tenants' stuff was destroyed. It was awful. It was really horrible. So again, statistically speaking, the property manager would have, if we had those units that had flooded, the property manager would have taken those units and they would have repaired them. They would have called the restoration company. They would have got the water sucked out. They would have done this. They would have done that. And that's great, because that's that's what we're paying them for, right? The problem that I see is that it's reactive and not proactive. If it was a reactive methodology, what they would have done is they would have gone and they would have, shoveled the snow around the foundations of all the different properties. The thing is that just due to the economies of scale, it's just not feasible. Like, the sheer manpower and the cost that it would take to go and shovel the snow around all of these different properties away so the basements don't flood, it's just not realistic. But what's going to happen is when they do flood, like I said, they'll call the restoration company, they'll suck out all the water, they'll replace the carpet, they'll dry it all out, they'll take care of it. But guess who foots that bill? You do, or I do, the property owner. And so it's just things like that where I'm like, I just don't know that I want this headache anymore. And so ultimately what we did is we just decided, like, for whatever reason, rental properties give me anxiety, but flip projects don't. So that is where we kind of said, okay, we're going to just transition into flipping full time. And that's what we did for a couple of years. We had a foreman, we had a whole crew. We could go in, we could gut a project in a day or two. And then we could renovate it and do it like in 3 or 4 months. So we were like 2021 and 2022, we were going crazy. 2023, we did pretty well too. But I think in 22, we did like 17 or 18 projects, which is a lot in a year, but when you've got the crew and you've got the people, it goes and it works. But the thing is that it just didn't weigh on my mind like the 40 other properties had that were just fulfilled by tenants. I don't know why. I don't know if it was because nobody was living in the properties, and like mentally you just realize that these are dumpy properties in the first place, and so you don't expect them to be great. Whereas with a tenant property, you're like, I want them to be nice, and then when you walk in, they're dumpy because tenants have trashed them. I don't know what like the logic is behind it, but it didn't weigh on me as much as before. So for whatever reason, we enjoyed flipping those homes. And then the other thing that I realized was I did the math. So like think about, on average, we would target and try to make around $40,000 per like net per project. And so I did the math, like always, on my calculator. Say I make $40,000 in a 4-month time span. Yes, there's taxes. Yes, it's not as tax efficient. There's no depreciation. But just like looking at the sheer numbers, if you were to take $40,000 net, how long would it take to make that same amount of profit from a rental property at $250 or $300 per month? The answer is 13 years. 13 years. Like, I just can't comprehend that I never did that math before. It made no sense to me. So yes, people will always say, well, you're not counting the tax benefits. You're not counting the appreciation. You're not counting the depreciation. What about the capital gains when you go to sell it? And my answer to that is, I don't care. I truly do not care. I don't give two shits because my mental health is worth so much more than the losses that I would have made. And I truly don't care. So now you're probably wondering, okay, what does any of this have to do with hard money? And I promise I'll get to that. So you're right. This is a bit long-winded, but after a while, the flips started to weigh on my mind just a little bit more. Not to the scale that the rental properties did, but I just, there were annoyances with that as well. And of course there's going to be annoyances in any business, but it just got to a point in my life where I wanted a little bit more flexibility, a little more freedom. And yes, we had a great crew. We had an incredible foreman and they took care of most of the stuff. But there were still issues, there were personnel issues, there were supply shortages, there were delays, there were the increased cost of just pretty much everything when you're flipping a house. And ultimately, we just decided that we want to move into something a little bit more passive. I'm in a stage in my life where we have enough for what we need, and I just don't need the extra complexity. So could I make more money flipping? Yes, totally. But I think at this point, hard money is the way to go for me simply because it's so much more passive. So we were very familiar with hard money simply because I borrowed hard money sorry about that. So we borrowed hard money so many different times because we were flipping houses. So I had all these different lenders. And for whatever reason, it just seemed like it was just the easier way out. Like I remember a project that everything that could have gone wrong did go wrong. We got to the inspection phase. We were selling the property. Turns out that it needed a new sewer line and a bunch of different stuff. There were delays and just crazy overages and all sorts of stuff. So we were supposed to make 40 grand on this property. We ended up making about $1,200. We basically broke even on this project. But when I was looking at the HUD statement when it sold, we ended up paying our hard money lender $25,000. He made 25 times what we did, 25 times, and he didn't have the sleepless nights, the anxiety, the stress, the managerial overhead of managing a team and like pulling all these materials and resources and things together. And he probably didn't lose any sleep. And so that was where that was where I finally decided, okay, I think this is the model that we want to go into. And the other thing that I will say too is like, especially when you are dealing with hard money, you're dealing with a higher caliber of individual. I get so tired of the sob stories with the tenants and the things like that. So there's different thresholds. With the tenants, you're kind of down here. With the flips, you're dealing with a higher caliber of person. You're dealing with a homeowner. And when you're dealing with somebody who is a business owner and managing money and can manage a project, like you're dealing with a higher caliber of person. And that's not to say that you won't have losses. It's not to say you won't have foreclosures. That's not to say you won't have issues with hard money. But I just think overall, hard money was the way to go for us simply due to the lifestyle, the headache, and the passiveness of it. I'm not saying it's 100% passive, but just ultimately, all things considered, I think it is more passive in the long run for us. Could we make more money with flipping? Yeah, probably. But I think hard money also scales pretty well too. So we've been lending now for about 2 years, and it's really kind of the next chapter or season of my life. And I really want to go hard and just really do nothing but hard money. I really enjoy it. It provides me all the aspects of real estate that I enjoy, which is dealing with the finances, running the numbers, but not having any of the downsides, which is the losses, the headaches with the tenants, and just all the delays and the contractors and the fees and just everything like that. So that's ultimately why we decided to become hard money lenders. And that's also the reason why we are starting this podcast, is because there's really not a lot of information out there. And so when I was starting, I was hoping that there was kind of like a one-stop shop or go-to guide to really answer all my questions, and there wasn't. So that's the role that I hope to fill here. So if you're a hard money lender, please subscribe. Please subscribe to Apple Podcasts or iTunes or Spotify or wherever you do, because it does really help us out. And at the same time, please check out Lender, because they are the sponsor of this video, and see if that can help your business. Last but not least, if there's any questions that you have, please let us know. We'd love to answer them and help you out as you're starting your journey or just trying to improve your already existing business. So thanks so much for tuning in. We'll talk to you next week.